So really lovely to be here. Thank you so much for joining our session. So today I've got Lani and Sachiko with us, and we're going to talk about data makes the world go round, how the right data strategy and Martech can actually enable security and privacy compliance. So lovely crowd. Thank you so much for coming. And special thank you to Sachiko because you flew all the way in from Germany to come to here to speak to us today. So thank you very much for your time. And why don't you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, I certainly will. My name is Sachiko Scheuing. I am Acxiom's European Privacy Officer. I've been doing this for 15 years. And in the meantime, I'm also the co-chair of a Brussels-based association, FEDMA, Federation of European Data and Marketing. And I have a lot of interactions with European institutions.
That's great, Lani.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Lani Kakiet. I'm a solutions consultant at Treasure Data, so really lovely for all of you to be here.
Great, we have got a lot to cover, so let's dive straight in. So my first question to you, maybe Sachiko, you can start first. What concerns you the most today with the companies in the data, privacy and security landscape?
Well, I sort of understand why you use the word concern, but for me, this is exciting stuff, right? I mean, I'm based in Europe, so a lot of portfolios that are moving right now do touch data, no doubt about it. In particular, I'm taking a look at 8 different portfolios, 8, and I show 9 fingers, anyways, 8 portfolios that I'm looking at. I think 3 of them you must be really familiar with. First of all, the e-privacy regulation. Now, UK has PECA, but in Europe, they're actually going to go one step further to clarify about consent and opt-in and stuff like that. So that is in the cooking. 2 more acronyms that you may have heard, Dma and Dsa. Now, these are 2 rules. One of them is actually thought for making sure that there's a level playing field, not that huge platforms dominate and dictate what happens in the market. And the other one is about making sure that we can all comfortably use our digital ecosystem as users because it would actually require so much more transparency. We also have the Artificial Intelligence Act, we also have the Omnibus Directive, and so on and so forth. I think a lot of people actually come to me and say, hey, look, it seems like we're approaching doomsday. Actually, we thought the GDPR day was the doomsday, but it seems like Europe is actually going even stricter on data use and things like that. I understand that point of view, and therefore I also understand the word concern. But from my point of view, I also need to say that the legislators are actually doing all these things to make sure that there is a clear rule for everybody. So that, and this is how they think, when there's a clear rule, then it would prosper because people would be innovating more with data, being, being actually improving the economic situation through that. But you see, here is a little bit of disconnect. And that is exactly what organizations like FEDMA, trade associations are doing. We are actually trying to say, well, you guys, you come up with all these rules, but did you know that that particular word that you put in actually kills my business? Or did you know that that sentence actually makes Europe a irrelevant existence in comparison to other Asian countries, South American countries, and America? They usually don't. So they really like this dialogue, and I really think that it's very important to continue this. Now, that was Europe, and now I would like to talk about the UK. I think Britain is in a very, very fortunate situation. I actually told you this morning, right, that, for a privacy professional, Britain is the place to be right now because, you see, unlike the Europeans, Britain can now sovereignly determine, right, we already had 4 years of GDPR. What did we learn? and this fabulous, fabulous department of DCMS is actually taking a look at all the learnings that we have had since the UK GDPR has been enforced. And they're actually starting a new dialogue. And I think some of you may have already seen the draft documents on which they're actually asking a consultation. One thing I do have to say though, I really love the change in the approach altogether, because you know how during the olden days of GDPR, a lot of criticisms went on to lobbyism. You know, lobbyists are coming, are meeting up with the MEPs and so on. Well, what the newspapers and so on didn't say is that there was no proper consultation mechanism. So these people who don't really know what the consequences would be for practitioners didn't even have an official chance to hear from you and I what that can mean to us, what positive effect that might have, but most likely what detrimental effects that can have. So how DCMS now is opening up to consultation. They're actually also going out to so many different countries and say, hey, what is your experience with your law? They're also talking to an expert, which previously, if you were talking about an EU legislation, they would have gone out to academics and, academics and activists, I would say only. But no, DCMS this time has got a very balanced board, also represented from the industry, also from lawyers, so that they can have a much better, well-balanced law for the future. So much about my enthusiasm of not only being here, but also about the privacy laws of the UK.
And I think just to Sachiko's point, so all these new and changing data privacy regulations really reflect consumers' attitudes these days. So consumers are starting to be really wary about data privacy, and they're less willing to share their data. However, they still expect, the personalized experience from brands that sharing data makes possible. So, this is really a challenge for a lot of businesses worldwide. And a lot of this value exchange really comes down to building and maintaining that trust with your customers. And that's not an easy feat. Businesses that we speak to every day have silo data, have silo teams, and it's really a challenge to be able to understand, where that data has come from, how do we respect the consent of our customers. And customer data platforms really simplify that process. So CDPs collect, unify that data and ensure that that's activated to the different downstream systems in a compliant and geo-specific consent manner. So we're really seeing customer data platforms become really key in the tech stack of companies these days. From a privacy perspective, it helps them from a compliance perspective to have a data catalog or inventory of all of the data or all of the source systems that hold customer data within the business, whether that's in marketing or customer service or sales operations. Having that inventory of where that data has come from enables them to manage traceability, and it helps them manage data subject access requests. And if we're also talking about data lineage, customer data platforms help them understand where that data has come from, how it's been processed, how it's been used to build profiles of a consumer, whether that's been built using fuzzy matching logic, and how that data has been used in machine learning models, and how that data has been used in campaigns and targeting. So having that data catalog and data lineage is becoming really critical to a lot of compliance teams these days. And if we're talking about identity resolution, you really need to be able to take into account consumers' consent and their preferences when you're building these linkages. Some of the linkages are required, and some linkages are forbidden. And sometimes it's more problematic to have a false linkage rather than a missing linkage when you're talking about identity resolution. So having a platform that can manage all of that complexity in terms of linking all of the data that you have about a consumer and ensuring that you have traceability is becoming really critical for a lot of businesses today.
That's great. There's lots of point made. So let's break it down. Sachiko, you've mentioned that it's actually a very exciting time to be operating out of UK.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's awesome. Very relevant.
Did I move here? No, I'm just kidding.
So how can companies take advantage of that instead of just reacting to it?
Well, I think, what is really important is that the fundamentals are not going to change, even though when the law is going to change. So just as Lani said, it is an absolute must to know what you have, to organize your house, to know which data you have, what they are for, how they can use and so on, to catalog it. That's definitely most important. And even though if there would be changes, that principle is not going to change. Secondly, I think it is also very important now, there's this concept of risk-based approach. Perhaps some of you have heard of this expression in the past, but it's a concept that has been embraced not only here in Britain or in Europe, but all over the world. And what it basically means is that data protection laws, particularly that of the GDPR, of which I'm quite familiar, it doesn't say when there's a risk, you should stop using it altogether. I mean, come on, that would kill your innovation, that would kill the economy, right? No, it is all about actually having a trade-off. Okay, so this is going to be a risk, but what if I pseudonymize it? I pseudonymize it so that, I can still single out, or I can still identify that is the same person, but then I don't necessarily have to know that this was Ollie Hardy, right? So pseudonymization is one thing that you can implement today and would still be useful in the future, because the more protection you put in place, the more flexible you are in data, and the ultimate flexibility would of course come from anonymization. So when I talk about anonymization, I mean, in Acxiom, we're actually really supporting and embracing the development of the interest in razor sharp, accurate data on a microgeographic level. When I talk about microgeographic level, I am talking about, say, 4 to 5 households, 10 persons, so to say. Now, the good thing about these geodata, this razor-sharp geodata, is that you have all the attributes. For instance, where, what's a hobby? Do you have a dog or a cat? Where do does he or she go to, or this group of people go to Singapore for a holiday or whatever? You have all these attributes available. It's just that it is aggregated to a neighborhood level. And that is a trade-off once again, because it is not spot on to that person. But if I just talk about, getting a little additional insight, that suffices. And you know what? You can still see the positive impact of it, and it is outside of the data protection law. So pseudonymization, so organizing your house, pseudonymization, anonymization. These things I would certainly recommend. It's very much risk-based, and it would allow you to use your data, leverage it much more than you can today.
And just to add to that as well, so the data that Sachiko is talking about is really this rich third-party data that we can bring into customer data platforms to enrich the first-party data that you already have. And businesses are prioritizing this first-party data. It's really about building that rich profile of each individual customer. And speaking of anonymization, when you're building that profile of your customers, it's important to tie all of the consent data into access policies within the platform. So ensuring that the right people have the right access to the data. We often have data engineers or marketeers or CRM executives or compliance teams manage different parts of the platform and access different data sets. So it's ensuring that you're tying data usage policies to everything that you're doing within the platform. So being able to categorize or label data as being sensitive or PII, ensuring you're enforcing policies to who can access that data, who can process that data, who can query that data, who can build segment or activate that data is really, really critical.
That's great. So from a solutions perspective, what you've mentioned is great, but I've got another question on top of that is when businesses operate cross regions, so they would have different requirements for how you handle data, for example. So how would you do that?
Sure. So at Treasure Data, we keep data safe for hundreds of global enterprises. So I think AB InBev is a great example. They're the beer brewer behind Stella, Corona, I'm sure all of us are familiar with. So we've been helping them with their digital transformation. And part of that transformation has been enabling them to manage all of their global data assets in a secure manner. So we've helped them unify data across over 1,000 different data sources. You can imagine, they operate in Europe and US and APAC and LATAM, and each different region has to operate within their own specific regulations. So we've helped them unify all of that data in a compliant manner, ensure that we're respecting the consent and preferences and the data usage policies within each specific jurisdiction, but at the same time still be able to activate that data and ensuring that before you're running a campaign, before you're running some analytics, before you're doing some modeling, that you have the right consent for that particular purpose, for that particular usage, for that particular channel and touch point.
That's great. So with all the legislation that is different across countries and things like that, but there's one thing that affects all the companies in the same way, which is the third-party cookies that's going away. So what are the considerations that companies can take, Sachiko?
Yes, I think you're asking me this question because it's some sort of mandatory question to ask in the
we have to
3
touch on
years
that,
ago,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So when the cookie deprecation stories started to become a topic, there were several initiatives that were floating around, having an ID consortia and things like that. But in anno 2022, what I see the most nowadays, I mentioned the importance of having control over your data. And I think that is also sort of spilling over to this third-party deprecation solution, and that is brands are now really looking into building up their own graph. They're building up their own identity graph, which I think is powerful. Now, it is not going to be easy, but if you think about a customer journey, what is the point of actually, communicating the wrong message to the wrong people? So say my surname is Scheuing, and there's this other guy who's living on the other side of this little German village where I'm living, who's also called Scheuing. Now, he's a horsey person, right? And he's every day out there riding his horses and so on. I'm a dog person. I have a puppy, really, really cute German Shepherd. So I'm interested in everything that relates to puppies. Now, if he gets a puppy advertisement, he'd be like, what do you want? It's a waste of money, it's a waste of effort for everybody. So this is how important it is to be sure that you are talking to the right person, also to satisfy the relevance, the wants from the consumer to be provided with relevant information. Now, I think from the data protection point of view, and I bet you didn't think about this, from the data protection point of view, it is very important that you process the data accurately. And also from that point of view, I really do commend this move towards developing the advertiser's own identity graph.
That's amazing. What about solution side of things, Lani?
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Sachiko said, I think the deprecation of cookies or mobile ad IDs, contrary to what's being portrayed, I don't think advertisers should see it as a doomsday scenario, is what Sachiko said. The value of cookies, we're seeing a loss of value of cookies recently with traffic being moved to media that doesn't necessarily rely on cookies. So whether that's mobile apps, mobile browsers, smart devices, we're also seeing ad blockers, really reduce the usage of cookies. So I don't think we should necessarily see this as, again, like a doomsday scenario. And we're seeing advertisers really have to rethink about the mechanisms and the tools they have in place to authenticate their audiences, to target their audiences, as well as measure the performance of their targeting. And some of the things that we're seeing from companies is that they're prioritizing their first-party data. I think this is a recurring theme that we hear a lot, and really, maximizing the data that they already hold and own about their customers. We're also seeing a move towards these identity initiatives that are cropping up, these identity consortia. We're hearing a lot about data clean rooms. So, data clean rooms help businesses connect their first-party data with aggregated third-party data that they wouldn't necessarily have access to in a compliant and privacy-secure manner. I think CPG companies are a great, or fantastic candidates for data clean rooms. So, they can tie all of their product usage data with perhaps data from the retailers or data from their partners that they might not necessarily have. So, if they're running models on their data, their product usage based on events like weather, they can run this against a data clean room and see, how that product usage is affected by weather, and then they can run that against their retailers, POS transactions, again, without seeing, the other party's data and ensuring that they're benefiting from the output. So, we're seeing all of these different evolving initiatives, and I think it's an exciting time, and I don't think we should see it as, a doomsday necessarily, because, I think the industry will survive.
That's great. We'll always thrive. And I love the positivity here. I was just also wondering, you've both mentioned data lineage and data clean rooms, all these approaches. Do you recommend these to build as a main part of your risk-based approach?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in terms of pseudonymous data, I've been working on this personally. I have been the German Ministry of Interior's advisor on the topic of pseudonymized data, and it has been under Angela Merkel's regime. It has been, gaining a lot of attention during the digital summit, they call it, and now this initiative is being taken, taken momentum, and together with the German Data Protection Officers Association (GDD) and Bitkom, this is like what's that? Chamber of Commerce in a way. And I'm also part of this. We're creating a code of conduct on, what is a robust pseudonymization. So definitely, I can also recommend you to take a look at different types of anonymization technologies. You think, oh, anonymization, I can't do anything with my data. No, there are different ways of actually making sure that it still works. Homomorphic anonymizations. Take a look at synthetic data. Now, at the very beginning, synthetic data was like really, really pointless, but we have now come to a stage that you can have quite some meaningful synthetic database to derive your information. And lastly, I think a lot of people are doing it, but not calling it this way, which is in the whole data, just chuck in a small piece of fake data through which you don't know which data is real data and which data is fake data. This is a technique called differential privacy. There are all sorts of ways to make sure that you provide the protection to the individual, the person's the records in your database, but also at the same time enables you to take the full advantage of the knowledge that you can get out of the database. So definitely.
That's awesome. What about solutions-wise, Lani?
Sure. I think I'll just end with 3 points. I think the first point is really that data privacy is really everyone's job within an organization. We often talk to the marketing teams, compliance teams, but it really should be part of all of the different cross-functional organizations, whether it's sales, customer service, sales ops, and really any team that manages or touches customer data. Second point is, we have all these fantastic tools here today and tomorrow, and without the right resources in place to make sense of the data, then you're not really leveraging the tools correctly. We speak to a lot of businesses who have a wealth of data, but they're really insights and analytics poor. So it's really having the right either in-house data engineers, data scientists, data teams, or having the right technology or strategic partnerships to enable you to make sense of the data you have. And then thirdly, it's just taking a step back and ensuring that you're putting the customer, the consumer at the heart of all of your activities, whether it's data compliance or when you're mapping out the customer journey. Just think back to what is the experience that you want to deliver, and how do we want to deliver that while respecting their choices and making sure that all of the activities that you're doing are transparent as well.
That's lovely. So it's really interesting how you've mentioned the more protective layers that you've got in your data, then the more flexible
Absolutely.
it is. And then for Lani, I think what's so correct is customer centric. Like, you really have to put the value exchange and being customer centric as like the core of your business value, isn't it? So that's really great. So thank you so much for the insights and knowledge, and thanks for your time and sharing with us. So shall we open up to the floor for Q&A?